And there are skeptics that are doubtful, well, could you sell the Bitcoin? Would you sell the Bitcoin? And the answer is yes, we could sell the Bitcoin. We could also sell Bitcoin derivatives.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Coinage. I'm your host, Zach Guzman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios here in New York City. It's good to be back home after a long Thanksgiving break. Hope you and your families, if you're watching here live, had a great Thanksgiving. As we return from Buenos Aires, coming back from DevCon down there, chatting with the co-chair of the Ethereum Foundation. Excited to bring you that interview, or at least a clip of it, in today's show, as well as a recap of everything we're seeing out there as the fear index hits a low. We've been basically at a low for the last few weeks as the Bitcoin sell-off has worsened. But is it too early to call a bottom? We've been talking about this for a while, but increasingly seeing some optimistic data come out, including a little bit of a lift in monster shares. We're going to dig into all of that on the show. Can't thank you enough for tuning in. It's been too long. I was missing everybody out there. It was too far away from this desk. It's good to be back. Our producer extraordinaire, Texas, behind the scenes, survived what was a terrible layover situation and flight cancellation situation. And we're all back now, and it's good to be back with you. Thank you for tuning in here on Coinage as we recap everything. Of course, want to take a look at the charts as we are seeing Bitcoin reclaim $90,000. We've been chatting with our guests here in the past a little bit, kind of digging through all of these things to dig into exactly where we're expecting prices to go. Also, don't want to overlook the fact that we're seeing Ethereum reclaim 3,000 as well. As we look at a little bit of a longer-term chart there, important psychological levels to hold here. And I think part of that, obviously, we'd be remiss if we didn't take a look at Monster's share price here as well, because that was driving a strong bit of the fear in terms of where we were going to go in this supposed rebound, mostly because the overhang and the narrative shift happened. We're gonna play the clip from the strategy investor call where we did see Michael Saylor say the words that many people thought they'd never hear him say, which was, oh, we might actually sell our Bitcoin. Of course, that is, as you see here, later on in the show. So we're not going to give that away just yet. But we are kicking things off with the SEC because SEC Chair Paul Atkins right now is actually just wrapping up his speech. I think it just ended. You can see this live shot here of that. This is what he was just down there at the NYSE speaking to everyone about basically markets, confidence in public markets. This is the scene down there at the NYSE. He's also slated to speak at the NASDAQ this week. Of course, when he stepped to the mic, it was interesting to see and hear a lot of what he was saying, which was that, look, we've got a lot more room to go in basically lifting some of these regulations. We've heard him talk about a new day at the SEC for quite some time. He's been in that post for not too long, but long enough to maybe have some of this come through. He was also weighing in on the likes of getting the Clarity Act, much needed confirmed rules here, of course, over at the CFTC. A lot happening there as they welcome in their new chair, or at least Trump's pick that seems to be on pace to get the CFTC on board with the Clarity Act as well. So a lot happening in New York today with Chair Atkins, as well as what's happening in D.C. But speaking of D.C., we also want to make note of where Trump's approval's at, because if you look at the new Gallup poll, in the man who has claimed to be crypto president extraordinaire, not going well, according to the Gallup approval ratings, or should I say, increasingly disapproval ratings when it comes to Trump's scores in that poll. It's fallen 5 percentage points to just 36%, the lowest of his second term, while disapproval's risen to 60%, as you can see on the chart. Worth noting that for a president in his second term, that is the worst that America has seen for a president since Nixon. And never very good to be in the category along with Nixon, some might say. But also interesting to kind of get a sense of where the reaction among the crypto crowd is when it comes to that, because, of course, that's just one chart. But if you poll some of the people in crypto, I want to bring up Bruce Fenton's tweet here, too, around this, because Bruce, on the Satoshi Roundtable, one of those voices in crypto a lot of people listen to. Granted, I believe, I don't want to get this wrong, so maybe I shouldn't say that he was on the pro-Trump camp, but certainly others who spent a lot of time with Bruce, including David Bailey, a lot of people in that kind of Bitcoin OG camp have been firmly in the pro-Trump camp. And so interesting to see a voice like him basically come out and criticize Trump in a tweet like this, retweeting that Gallup poll that we just showed you, basically saying Trump turned America first into America second, had a huge mandate and squandered it. But the big piece here is this part. He supported sovereign money and Bitcoin only to pivot to family crypto grift. Ouch, first of all. But also probably in line with what we've been trying to highlight here on Coinage for quite some time when it comes to where the priorities are as quote-unquote crypto president. Is it for, adoption and rulemaking in DC that's going to lift all of crypto, or is it just squarely to try and squeeze out more money from these projects? And of course, if you've been tracking everything that we've been tracking, basically since Trump and Melania, the launch of those dual meme coins, harder and harder for people to really take the position that it is all about lifting crypto writ large. So very interesting to see kind of some of the voices in crypto, perhaps, I don't want to say jumping ship, but certainly shifting from a pro-Trump everything he does is great for crypto into a more who is he helping specifically here. And I think that that's pretty well communicated from the public in that Gallup poll, but increasingly from some voices in the crypto community itself. So wanted to highlight that specifically just because we're shifting into what will be regarded as year two. In year end here, you've got a lot of people optimistic that, maybe perhaps we see the Clarity Act come through. Might be a long shot considering that we've got less than a month to go left in the year. But who knows? Could be January. And of course, if you've been listening to Tom Lee's price calls, still calling for a new all-time high before the end of January when it comes to Bitcoin. So when you look at that chart, maybe perhaps some of these things falling in place, not too crazy to think. Because since we started, we're now into the 91K now. So all of these things potentially still juicing what we could see in terms of what Tom Lee is predicting as that new all-time high could potentially come in just a few months' time. So that is the political ground setting in D.C. And of course, as we talked about, that really has shifted into the background. More pressing has been what we've seen play out on Wall Street, which is why we started the show with where Chair Atkins is right now. But the big thing is two stories there. As I mentioned, we're going to get into Monster in a little bit. But the other big one to talk about when it comes to Wall Street is Vanguard's complete 180 when it comes to allowing people to now trade as of today, I believe. We've been trying to see if this is live now for Vanguard customers. I suppose it is. Being able to trade Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP and Solana ETFs. Keep in mind, Vanguard had basically said, nah, this is not in the interest of our clients. For a long time have taken that position, have doubled down on that position when everyone else like BlackRock were starting to rake in money. And all of a sudden, Vanguard, shout out to Eleanor Terrett, who was ahead of this one, had been saying that Vanguard was going to do this. Now official, as Bloomberg reported, and now today, we believe that Vanguard has now started to offer these things to clients. But keep in mind, Vanguard's a giant when it comes to allowing people to trade longer-term retirement portfolios. And now getting access to those types of holders could be a huge unlock when it comes to liquidity here. So we can't overlook the Vanguard piece of this story. Now, interesting to pair that with kind of where the fears have come from, which is exactly that, which is that none of this should be accepted because it could be damaging to customers who might be trading retirement accounts on Vanguard or using Vanguard to plan for retirement. And part of that is because that they didn't like what was happening in Bitcoin or perhaps Bitcoin's volatility. But let's talk about that because Bitcoin's volatility, obviously, as we know, is down. Part of that is how Monster over time has a chart that kind of looks like this. A couple things to talk about when we show a chart like this over Strategy's stock price and where it's gone mostly since July. Because Strategy makes its money off of Bitcoin volatility. We're seeing some return to Bitcoin's implied volatility, but not anything near the likes of what it had enjoyed before. And so with the way that Monster's built this with their structured products, dividends, etc., increasingly, as volatility comes down, Strategy making less money off of that means that they're going to have to look to potentially different ways to pay and start to deliver on the dividends, or I guess I don't want to call them fixed income because it's kind of crazy to call that stuff fixed income, but they are dividend yielding products. Essentially, that Michael Saylor thinks the volatility and the money that Strategy can make off of Bitcoin's volatility will pay for the other structured products that they've released. And we just want to play a little bit of the clip because this is kind of the shot heard around the world for a guy who consistently posts on X that the best thing investors can do is never sell their Bitcoin. Is a pretty big 180 to finally hear Michael Saylor, dare we say, almost on the scale of a Vanguard saying, hey, this stuff is toxic. We don't want to give it to our customers, to all of a sudden now letting them trade crypto ETFs. Perhaps on that same scale, you have Michael Saylor, who has said, never sell your Bitcoin, all of a sudden come out on the earnings call yesterday and say, hey, we might sell our Bitcoin. Just want to play the clip because I think it was pretty important to reset expectations here. Here is Michael Saylor on the Strategy earnings call talking about when we might see Strategy dip below 1x MNAV, when they might potentially have to sell their Bitcoin. Take a listen.
Below 1 times MNAV, we just get lots of questions. And there are skeptics that are doubtful, well, could you sell the Bitcoin? Would you sell the Bitcoin? And the answer is yes, we could sell the Bitcoin. We could also sell Bitcoin derivatives. And we would do that because that's in the best interest of the shareholders. And because it's in the best interest of the shareholders, it's best for the company and therefore best for the Bitcoin community, as well as the credit community, as well as the equity investors.
So if you'll hear on that one, it's best for a lot of people. Push comes to shove, though, it can't be best for everybody. That's really not the way that this works, especially when you've essentially, issued debt, as Strategy has, because then you've got people who are playing that side of the game, and you've got equity holders who are playing that side of the game, and increasingly, obviously, the top of that, selling equity, issuing more equity is basically what they plan to do to monetize things when they are trading above 1x MNAV, which is where they are now and have been. And so that's why you've also seen kind of the equity chart on Monster shares come down the way that it has as they continue to issue more equity. And so, I don't know, put all the pieces together. One thing I do want to clarify is that at the very least, as we've covered in the past, if you haven't watched our story, again, Coinage being ahead of the game here, if you haven't watched our video on Strategy that we put out, when was that, Texas? I want to say like earlier, that was way back when, maybe February or something, 3 months ago. I think it was like 6 months ago. Looking at kind of like why Strategy was being a huge boost to the upside, and it was. Obviously, again, somewhat of a levered bet, not somewhat, definitely a levered bet on Bitcoin in terms of how Saylor was raising a bunch of money to buy up more Bitcoin, as he had been. That's big boost to the upside. But now, as things kind of flip, the big fears are, okay, does a DAT like Saylor's, does Strategy just suddenly need to dump Bitcoin? And I think that's a huge bit that the market is educating themselves on right now, and partially also why we didn't go as far as a lot of people have. I want to bring up Sandeep's tweet here too, because Sandeep, very smart guy, was just on a panel with him down at DuneCon in Buenos Aires as well, basically posting what I think is basically, in a nutshell, why so many people are afraid right now, because a lot of people are pairing the dots between what happened with Terra Luna and the FTX collapse in 2022 to what potentially could happen here in basically fear-maxing what might happen if Strategy starts to unravel. But just to be very clear, these are two very different situations. I'm not going to say they're both levered situations because they are by default. But what you had with Terra Luna was literally a coin backing all of it that was tied to nothing in terms of Luna and where we saw that go, asymptotically print to zero. Whereas with Strategy, I will at least give Saylor this. It is based on the idea of real dividends. coming from his other products, but to pay those real dividends, you are essentially betting that Bitcoin is going to appreciate over time. Everyone keeps pointing out that his net average price is around 75K, and if it dips below that, oh no, he must sell. That's partially what they were talking about in the clip that we just showed you. That whole earnings call was built around how do we build up a reserve. Some people might say, hey, look, Terra had a reserve too. Again, very different, just because the idea of what exactly Terra had was fully exposed. Hey, here's exactly how much money we have. Whereas with Saylor, he's been able to raise, continues to raise, talking about a $1.4 billion buffer. So there's a lot to differentiate here in terms of all of that. I will say some of the similarities is you can raise up until the point that you can't raise anymore. And that is true. We've seen that time and time again, both with Terra and with FTX. When the switch flips, it becomes a little bit harder than you've ever planned to keep the perpetual machine in motion. And that could be potentially why. Maybe some of these fears never really had to grapple with if you never really understood them. I think perhaps some of the people in the market right now waking up to those fears even existing, those possibilities even existing. However, I think we are seeing perhaps a pendulum swing back in terms of, okay, what are the odds that that actually does happen? The nuclear worst case scenario. And I think a mispricing of those things happening, unfolding, it's a low probability chance, because Bitcoin would really have to stay down for a really long time, so long that Saylor wouldn't be able to repay the debt. And that is unlikely, just kind of given everything you know about Bitcoin. So sure, is it a possibility that you could see a complete implosion? Yes. Is it as likely as I think the market is bracing for right now? No. And I think that's why you're seeing this fear index. It had hit a year-long low of 10 November 21st. And now we are seeing a little bit of a rebound as we're at 16. But obviously, this is the all-time chart. I want to bring up the 30-day. Not as strong as a rebound as you can see here. So a long ways to go. This is why, as we've titled this show, potentially are we in a bottom? As we reclaim 90K for Bitcoin, I think that's what's happening right now. I think generally the market is repricing some of these disaster scenarios that they've just woken up to when it comes to looking at a monster as a complete unwind, as if it were a Terra Luna, which it is not. But then again, you tell us if we're wrong. Throw it in the comments and say otherwise. That's what we're here to do, is to take into account all of the other opinions around the world of crypto. Perhaps we could be wrong. You tell us. Honestly, that's what we're here for. Happy to voice other opinions, but for now, that is what we're hearing from our own community. If you want to join our community, feel free. Mint an NFT, hop in the token gated Telegram. Tell us differently if you want, but generally, I lean on the smart people we chat with. And that is where we close the show today, because down in Buenos Aires at DevCon, we did chat with a very smart man, the co-chair of the Ethereum Foundation, and perhaps why we are seeing Ethereum lead as it reclaims 3K. Perhaps why we're seeing that play out is because there's a huge upgrade on the horizon, Fusaka. The upgrades that have historically, I wanted to go back and look at this. If anyone knows a good chart, definitely send it to us or tag it in the comments here. I think generally Ethereum's outperformance has been tied to some of these upgrades before. We've covered Denkun in the past, and the way that blobs had completely changed the gas efficiencies around Ethereum. We got a chance to ask Tomasz, the co-executive director of the Ethereum Foundation, about a lot of those Fusaka upgrades, what he's most excited about when it comes to that, as this is planned for tomorrow to go into effect. It's exciting to see this roll out over time, and I think it's something that's kind of somewhat lost in terms of how Ethereum gets upgraded and why it matters and where the value of Ethereum comes from, is kind of the coordination of all of these different actors and players in the Ethereum space pushing an upgrade like this live. Of course, I'm not an Ethereum expert, so we lean on the co-chair of the Ethereum Foundation to talk to us about that upgrade down in Buenos Aires. I want to play a little bit of what we heard from Tomasz and spotlight why I think it might be important to throw that out at you as potentially a catalyst to trigger all of this into year-end. Here's what Tomasz told us. Take a listen. I want to get into Fusaka and what's the expectation there, because it's a big upgrade. We've seen historically a lot of enthusiasm goes into those things. What's the most exciting thing for you about this upgrade?
For Fusaka, Piratas for sure. So this is headliner, and headliner should be the most exciting thing. So we decided, like, we have this process now where for every single fork, we choose headliners for the consensus layer, for execution layer, and Piratas is headliner for Fusaka. And It should be talked about because it scales layer 2s through scaling the blob numbers. On the side of it, you have multiple smaller EIPs that are related to preparation for scaling, like performance optimizations not really performance optimizations, but repricing of some of the opcodes that either were just not priced well over the last 3, 4, 5 years, or are not very aligned with the fact that ZK technology is coming and has slightly different bottlenecks. So we're preparing for those EIPs, like the good balanced performance of all the opcodes across all the clients, and balanced bottlenecks performance of the prover killers for the ZK VMs.
Yeah.
So all of this together will continue in Amsterdam and beyond for further scaling of L1s. Then there is some aspects of the UX, so R1 curve, SCP-256 R1, which is a standard for passkeys for many operators, and then you can use passkeys more efficiently at the edge devices, so it should unlock some better logging models.
Interesting. So that is a little bit of what's to come when Fusaka hits tomorrow. So that is on our radar for things, because obviously, as I mentioned, these are tied to usual periods of outperformance for Ethereum. Something that CCN, just bringing this up too, has looked at in terms of history giving a clue as to how performance is generally linked to this. Of course, it's always difficult to tease this out because in this article, they're talking about a 30% rally on the Pectra upgrade. Let's scroll down here. Because you can look at the past, but I think a lot of tied to this. The Pectra upgrade came at a time when the overall market was in recovery mode. If you remember, after the big tariff tantrum, saw a big blowout in terms of prices, and then a move back to the upside. As I bring up the ETH chart, you'll remember when this was, as it was a period of weakness back earlier in the year. Then you had Pectra upgrade, and basically get us back to here. So is that going to repeat? It might. As we've talked about, Tom Lee's price prediction is back to 7 to 9K by the end of January 2026. And so if you're a believer, credit to you, by the way, if you've been able to hold through all this and say, look, Q4 is historically a strong time. If you've taken it on the chin in October, which did not prove to be much of an October, if you've taken it on the chin in November, which proved to be not a great month either, then you're sitting here in December and you're saying, well, what the hell? Why not let it roll one more time, baby? December is going to be the month. And I credit you for staying in the arena because maybe you're basing it off of that. Maybe you say Fusaka could be the trigger that gets us back to where the promised land of 7 to 9 or perhaps new all-time highs just in general. Because Ethereum kind of topped out around that number last time it tried to make a charge around 48, 49. We'll see what happens here. And we leave you with that on our first show back since DevCon. More to come from down there in Buenos Aires. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel or check out all the headlines around the world of Web3 at coinage.media. And of course, that is where you can join the community-owned media outlet Experiment here at Coinage with us, alongside the co-founder of Netflix and various other leaders in the Web3 space. Until next time, I'm Zach Guzman. Thanks again for tuning in. See you again soon.